Hello, I'm Kristian, and welcome to the Jamoir Leadership Podcast, a show where we talk about effective collaboration, influence, and leadership in an increasingly complex world. My interview partner is Dr. Dirk Schlimm. Dirk is an international leadership expert and the author of Influencing Powerful People. The purpose of this podcast is to share ideas and stimulate discussion, and it does not constitute professional advice of any kind. If such advice is needed, the services of a competent professional should be sought. The speakers, host, and Jamoir International Incorporated are not to be held responsible for any use, misuse, or reuse of the content. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to the Jamoir Leadership Podcast. I'm your host Kristian, and I'm so glad that you're joining us today. In this episode, we are diving into part 2 of a 2-part interview series with Kristian and Karl of Gastronomous. These are 2 young entrepreneurs who are sharing a lot about their journey and the challenges they face in the startup world. So we're diving in now. Dirk is about to ask a question about engineering challenges, and we're going to get into that. And of course, by the end of this episode, we will ask Kristian and Karl about their advice for aspiring leaders or those looking to get into the startup world. So very interesting conversation. We hope you enjoy. And as always, if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to get in touch with us at podcast@jamoir.com. But for now, diving into part 2. Let's get into it.
Automating a cooking process, Kristian, I would say, how hard can that be? I mean, is it really that difficult? And again, having visited your place, I have an appreciation that it may sound easy, but it's not. And so tell us a little bit, without giving away the secret sauce, pun intended, in the cooking world, but what can you tell us about some of the big challenging in automating a cooking process, as you said, that has been around and hasn't changed for a long time?
Sure. I think very, very early on when we started, I'll put it this way, Dirk, the later you get into the company, earlier decisions you made really begin to transcend. So when we first started, we said, okay, we don't want to, and this was kind of, I guess, more a high level strategic, but we said, okay, our foresight is not to try and automate the tasks in a way that humans would. So, okay, right now, someone slips a hamburger by grabbing a spatula, putting it underneath the patty, turning it upside down. So we said, okay, we're not going to try and make robots, again, mimic human actions. Instead, we're going to make machines which kind of do the cooking process in a way that's best for a machine to do. So again, going back, you make very high level decisions that become narrower, but they transcend into the end product. To get a little bit more granular, I guess, anytime you're doing something that's never been done, number one, you don't have any sort of benchmark to refer to. And number two, you got to really trial and error for almost everything. So the technologies, we're using are proven in other industries. They're proven in other applications, but never in the food space. And you're dealing with heat, you're dealing with grease, you're dealing with so many different factors where, again, it's never really been done. So it's up to us to try it out and see where it fails and adjust accordingly. So it's very challenging, but very exciting at the same time.
Yeah, that's interesting, Kristian. And maybe Karl, if I again looking to have you jumped in, and maybe also a little bit on the engineering side. So in some way, I mean, there's a lot of talk about AI everywhere, and it almost appears that every software company is now calling themselves an AI company, and you wonder, is it really AI or is it software? So it's a bit hyped, maybe, even though there is, it has burst into the mainstream, of course, with ChatGPT and Gemini and those Copilot application. But maybe, Karl, quick question for you: are you guys really deploying AI here, or why? How do I understand AI in the automation of a cooking process?
Yeah. There's of course two components to building an automated cooking solution. There's one, the hardware side of things, and then there's the software side of things. The hardware is the mechatronics, so the actual mechanisms that do the transformative process on the piece of food. And what I mean by transformative process is, for example, the actual cooking. So moving the food product around, heating the food product, like transforming it from a raw piece of food to an end product that a consumer can then eat. But then those physical mechanisms, let's call it, that physical hardware has to be controlled and programmed in some form. Then that's when the software really kicks in. So the software controls the machine. It's the brain of the machine. And when you think about the brain of the machine, that's where AI can really make a difference. It's because if you look at robotics in the last 10, 20, 30 years, everyone's always been saying, oh, this is the decade in which robotics will finally become mass commercialized. And realistically, every time someone's made that prediction, it hasn't really come true, other than probably in large scale, like automotive manufacturing. And the reason for that is because there's so many edge cases and use cases that you have to think about and program into a machine's controls, which make it very burdensome and honestly not as efficient as one would like for these kinds of products to be mass scaled. But now with the advances in AI, you can create very, very sophisticated brains of these machines, especially brains in which the machine can figure out what to do in very nuanced and edge case situations, which previously was extremely difficult to account for. And so now, I mean, not just in the field of food automation, but just general robotics. I mean, you see this with humanoid robotics in Figure AI, in Tesla's Optimus, and a few other companies. Now the brains are smart enough for the robots to actually be efficient and actually deliver the promised value that people have always thought of in the field of robotics. Sure, it's still expensive, but now the value prop makes a lot more sense, at least financially.
Yeah, and Karl, thanks for explaining us. And I think I think our listeners get a bit of an appreciation for the complexity, right? So we have the hardware, we have software, we have AI. Now we have to worry about global distribution. Also, we talked about that earlier. It all starts with the right people, and I think we get an idea here of something. If you look at a burger flipper robot, you look at that thing and say, well, again, how hard can this really be? And I think we're learning here, as we're talking to the two of you, that it is not easy, and that's why you guys do what you do, and you're looking at the system as a whole, and so I think that to me is really a big takeaway. And you again, I take us back to where Kristian started us off. Yeah, look at reality, right? Look at all the things that are needed, and if you have a missing piece, that one missing piece can maybe be the knockout factor, and so you have to look at all of these aspects. So I think that's starting to become a really important takeaway for me here. But you did mention, Kristian, there is grease, and sometimes cooking can be messy. We know that if we cook at home, we don't like to do the dishes, and if you're in a commercial kitchen, you may have even more waste, or a lot of waste, and that become a big problem, waste disposal. So just wondering, are you guys thinking about that part of it also? Are you thinking about sustainability as part of what you do? Just maybe you can have a comment on that. So Kristian, back to you on that one.
Most definitely, Dirk. One of our products, which actually is kind of mentioned on our website, is a natural gas grill. And if you look at that product in particular, it's using around less than half the gas that its current equivalent does.
Wow.
So it's kind of product by product. Dishwashing is definitely a big one. I would say one thing which the entire restaurant industry really struggles with is waste management. And when you look at automation, one of its biggest strengths is accuracy. So across all products, I think a really, really big thing is going to be, increased accuracy, reduced waste management, and waste management is or waste in general, food waste, is probably one of the biggest contributors towards kind of GHG emissions and all those things. So definitely, there's a very, very big opportunity for these sort of solutions to really reduce kind of your global footprint.
Excellent. Yeah, no, so that's good, and I'm glad we got that out there. So again, that we get a better appreciation for really the range of problems that your product is solving, and that become part of the value proposition. So, Karl, how does it resonate when you go out there? How does that resonate? Yeah, jump in here.
Yeah, so my perspective on sustainability is a bit different, especially for the products that we make. I mean, when I think of what kind of sustainability value our solutions bring to the QSR market, to the fast food market in general, it's the sustainability of that business concept, that restaurant concept. Because the issue that they're dealing with nowadays is that they can't find enough people to, one, profitably, and two, consistently deliver their value proposition, which is cheap, quick, very consistent food, right? And if you don't have that core piece of labor, you're not able to deliver that value, and thus your brand is either tarnished or at risk of being tarnished. So what our solutions do is we enable and empower restaurant owners to deliver that value consistently and as promised to their customers. So the sustainability factor, in my perspective, is the sustainability of that business and restaurant concept in perpetuity.
So Karl, so thank you for that, because we do think when we hear sustainability, you're right, primarily in terms of environmental concerns, but what does it really take to sustain a business? In this case, your customer's business, and again, what comes to mind here is people saying, "Hey, AI and robots, they're taking away our jobs." There's a concern about that, but in that particular industry, you do have a labor shortage, and so your technology enables people to stay in business, to keep their jobs at restaurateur or even small fast food outlets. And so really thank you for adding that perspective to it, and I think it's a super important perspective that deserves to be called out, and is a nice segue here to my last question for the two of you, but then Kristian will be back after this one here. And Kristian, I think Karl kind of started us down the road that little bit. Just give us your view of the impact of Gastronomous on the restaurant industry as a whole. What is the big picture here? What are your long-term goals? I know you have made inroads, and sounds like you have made a lot more since the visit I had with you. So take us a little bit into the future here. First, Kristian, and then.
Well, I think Dirk, if you look at the history of the fast food QSR space, the last big pivotal moment, in my opinion, was, I think it was the early 50s, somewhere around that time frame, when the McDonald's brothers kind of introduced the current fast food kitchen layout, and how we know of it today. I think what we're working towards and the ambitions we have will be that next pivotal moment in the coming years. So let's see. I think it's a long journey ahead, many challenges. But at the end of the day, we're working towards something big, and towards an industry which is really a household name, and hopefully Gastronomous will be at the forefront of that.
Oh, excellent. So, Kristian, I got to come back to that, but quickly, Karl. Then I'm going to editorialize, and then I'm going to hand it over to our Kristian.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kristian nailed it on the head there. I mean, what we're trying to do is of course enable our end customers to build great businesses. That's what our solutions provide at the end of the day, and we couldn't be more proud to help them do so.
Yeah. No, Yeah, no, so and that's fantastic. And so for me right now, we have heard about, hey, you got to look at the reality out there. You need great people. You need to understand the tech. You need to understand your customer. And now you added what to me is a huge ingredient in a successful startup business or any business is a vision, and a vision that is much bigger compared to where you currently are. So thanks for sharing that. And with that, I hand it over to our Kristian here for a few more questions, and thank you for waiting patiently here, Kristian.
No. Thank you, Dirk, and of course, thank you, Kristian and Karl, for sharing all those thoughts. Wonderful. And you know what? Back to Dirk. Thank you for limiting your editorialization. That's always appreciated. But I have a few questions. We always like to, as we get to the close of our conversation, we like to open up the conversation a bit to think about advice for its aspiring leaders, people who are perhaps considering getting into leadership or continuing down their path towards leadership in different industries, and all the practical questions that they might have, and maybe places where your advice or your experience might speak to their situation. So my first question for you both would be, what advice in general would you give to young entrepreneurs looking to disrupt traditional industries with new technologies? What's something you might say to someone in those shoes?
That's a good one. I would probably say a few things. Number one, get product out there, or at least get something out there where you can begin, meeting with people. Again, I think one of the smartest decisions we made was very, very early on. We built something, and again, it was never going to be a product we brought to commercialization, but we built something where we were able to show our capabilities and get interest and get the ball rolling. You can very easily spend 30 years in a garage developing something which you believe is great, and when you're ready to go to market, you realize that no one's interested in it. So I think the most important thing is to, again, get yourself out there, and also be very honest with yourself. I think one of the most important things as an entrepreneur is you can't be emotional. You can't be emotionally tied to a product, to a decision made in the past. No matter how much work was put into it or whatever it is, you got to be realistic, and you got to be able to pivot very, very quickly. So I could go on and on, but I would say that those things are definitely at the top of the list.
Oh, great. And Karl, any insight you might have?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Kristian on that front. Just get something out into the market so that you can test your assumptions, test and validate your assumptions. That's the most important, because the real feedback you get from customers, from them using your product, will always be different from what you initially had thought. And the only way to iterate and build a product that they really want is to get those opinions and those pieces of validation.
Wonderful. That, I think that's great advice from you both, and I think that's very helpful. Perhaps hard to apply, given that we do get emotionally tied to our products or to our plans, but I think that's a very realistic reality we need to account for. So maybe now with this next question, I'll ask you both to reflect a bit about your journey and, of course, your experiences, and I'll ask, what are some key leadership lessons you've learned throughout your journey with Gastronomous? What have you learned, perhaps in terms of lessons or experiences that shape the roles you're in today, and how you lead teams or lead people or are becoming leaders in an industry?
I'll quickly add in there. I think leadership, as it comes to leadership, I believe everyone has their own, style, and at the end of the day, it's got to be very authentic, I believe. So it's got to be something which resonates with you, with your core values, and kind of, where you are as a team, and it's something which needs to adopt over time. At least on my end of things, something I take great value in is respecting every job, and as you grow as a business, your team is going to grow, and the skill sets are going to grow, and experience level is going to grow. But to me, at least, at the end of the day, building a great company doesn't come from the top. Partly it does, but really a company is a group of collective people who are working towards the same goal and same vision, and you need to make sure that every job, no matter how big or how small, is done is done to the best of its abilities. So I think it's valuing each member of your team, working on developing each member of your team, and at the end of the day, that's how you're going to get the best out of everyone.
Karl, any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. A few thoughts here. When it comes to leading a team, I mean, the leader must take full responsibility for any setbacks and failures, and must really protect their team in doing so. That's just the responsibility of a leader. And of course, when the team hits hard times, make sure that the leader is the one putting his head down and trailblazing through the difficulties, right? Like leading the team through a fire, and keeping everybody protected and well aware of the situation is always extremely important. And then when it comes to, I'd say, executing, leading by example is also an extremely important facet of that. If a team sees their leader working extremely hard and doing everything they possibly can to hit a goal or a milestone, then the rest of the team will be inspired to follow through as well. And I think that's a very underrated factor of leadership, because most people think that, oh, if I'm the leader, I can just sit back, I've got a whole team to do it for me. And I think it's quite the opposite. I think the leader should be the hardest working person on that team, and really doing everything they can to propel and to help their counterparts.
Wonderful. That was great advice and reflection from you both. I think that's something Dirk and I, over the course of our podcast here, have come to really appreciate, speaking to different people and reflecting on different factors in leadership. It's first of all, that authenticity in leadership is so important, being who you are, and people respond to authentic leaders in a way that they wouldn't to inauthentic leaders. So that's a great first point. And then taking responsibility, that certainly builds to a point where people will respect you, want to follow you, and as I understand it, that's really a key force behind being an energizing leader that's motivating and gets people moving and on the same page. So that is great advice from what you've learned from those lessons there. So that said, I have a final question for you both, and feel free to answer however you'd like. We're thinking about people who might be passionate about joining a startup, especially in we could call it technology-driven role. What should they look for? And maybe more importantly, for people listening, how can they prepare to join a startup? What might advice you give there?
From my perspective, I think startups definitely are not for everyone, and you got to be honest with yourself and is it something which you're prepared for and lines up with where you want to be in your life now and in the future. I think it requires a large degree of sacrifice. I mean, startups have large goals, have large visions, and the reality of the fact is 95% of the time they don't work. So you're joining at the beginning a company where 95% chance it doesn't happen. But if you are part of that 5% group, and I think something you got to be mindful of when you join is being convinced that, okay, I believe that this company will be that 5%er. And if it is, then I don't think that there's a better place to learn and to grow very quickly, and to get a great amount of opportunities very quickly. Startups are the best place. But on the flip side of things, it also means that you're going to have to make sacrifices. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of pressure. And again, if you're willing to do that, and you kind of have the burning desire to work on something which, again, you believe could be a game changer, then startups are the way to go.
Great. Karl, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'll break it into two segments. The first is just alignment. I mean, there's like by definition, a startup is just a new high growth company in a certain space. So there's a lot of different industries in which you can participate in. You can go into SaaS, you can go into fintech, you can go into the hardware or deep tech like we are. And I think you really have to be aligned with the kind of technology that that company is building, because that essentially is where, like, when things get really tough and you're not completely committed and aligned, realistically, you're going to have a hard time making it through the finish line. So you have to be extremely, extremely well aligned with the company's mission, vision, and goals, and make sure that when you sign up, you're in it for the long run. And the second piece of it is be ready for the different kind of learning structure and work ethic. As Kristian mentioned, like, if you really want to catapult your career, there's no better place to do so than at a startup. I'd say 1 year of experience at a startup is probably equivalent to 5 years of experience at a large incumbent, just because of the pace of innovation, the very, very high level of autonomy and responsibility that you will have as an employee at that company, and the extremely, extremely high roof for growth. But at the same time, you have to be wanting that. If you're gonna walk into a startup and not be willing to put the time and the effort to really grow yourself and have that burning desire to take yourself to the next level, then it's probably not the best fit. But if you do have that burning desire and you do really want to grow and build and learn, then it's the perfect place and opportunity to do so. I don't think there's any other kind of company or career path that you could choose in which you will learn as much and have as much pressure and be forced to really adapt and grow your capabilities as much as at a startup.
Wow, wonderful. Again, thank you both so much. Very, very practical, very helpful, and very realistic advice. I think a lot of people will appreciate that and be challenged to think more about that, especially if they're interested in joining a startup, being realistic, but also that certain kind of person, high risk, but sounds like high reward, to use that phrase. So, Dirk, those are my questions. I'll hand it back to you. Any final questions or thoughts before we end out here?
The only final thought that I have is that this has been a fantastic episode. Kristian and Karl, it's just super to have you on the show. I learned a lot. I think this will be a very, very interesting episode that our audience will appreciate. And thank you so much for being on. I look forward to visiting again, see you guys progressing further. And so, yeah, thanks for being on the show today. So, Kristian, I hand it to you to send us off here.
All right. And all I have to say then is thank you as well, Kristian and Karl. It's been so great to chat with you. And I think, yeah, our listeners will really enjoy this. So thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dirk and Kristian. We had a great time, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
That sounds good.
100%. Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Kristian. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate you having us on today.
All right, and I will close it here by, first of all, thanking again Kristian and Karl for joining us on the Jamwar Leadership Podcast. What an amazing conversation. What an amazing two-part interview series. We're so grateful for them joining us, sharing what they shared, and just giving us insight into the entrepreneurial world of startup, of AI, of technology, and all those amazing things. So we will stay in touch with Kristian and Karl, hear what they're doing at Gastronomous, and, of course, hoping that we might have them on the channel again. Big thank you to Dirk as well for the questions and keeping us rolling. Great conversation. And finally, of course, as always, thank you to you, listener, for joining us on the Jamwar Leadership Podcast. We do this so that we can have amazing conversations and bring you into them. So as always, I want to encourage it again. If you have any questions, any comments, any suggestions, anything at all to share, reach out to us at podcast@jamwar.com, podcast@jamwar.com. We'd love to hear from you. But that's it for today. We hope that you join us again next time on the Jamwar Leadership Podcast. Take care.